Why is it always Juventus that kind of brings this dark cloud and shadow over Italian football?
Yeah, and it's a completely different, everything's changed since the what happened in 2006 with Calciopoli, which had to do with referees and trying to get a bit of advantage from referees. This is a completely different scandal, and one that has to do with accounting. I mean, it's the simple way of saying it is they're trying to fix the capital gains, shady accounting practices. They're artificially inflating transfer fees. So basically, to dumb it down, what they've been doing is, let's say they sell a player for 10 million euro, right? And then they buy a player for 10 million euro, but they spread out that contract over 5 seasons. They basically can say that it was an 8 million euro profit. And a lot of teams do this, right? This is no secret. A lot of teams spread out the cost of a player over a certain amount of years. But what they then did is they artificially increased the values of players to try to balance the books, to try to balance the capital gains. And there were some egregious examples. I think the Miralem and Pjanic for Artur swap, where both the players were giving like a 65 million valuation, was crazy. But then you go and you see all these players that have never even stepped foot on Serie A going for 8 to 12 million. And, there's like a laundry list of these players. Now, other teams have done this, but the problem with Juventus is twofold. The problem is, one, there's wiretaps and there's written statements that kind of confirm what they were trying to do. And, the second one is that they're a public company. They're in the stock exchange in Italy. So they have a duty to the shareholders to be very accurate with what's happening behind the scenes in the books. So this is a massive problem. And this is really what's going to now, bring in the criminal charges too of exactly the extent of what they were doing. It is not good news for Juventus all across the board.
Matteo, great to have you on, and I feel like this is a bit of a Ligue 1 reunion with you, Ian, and I from many moons ago. But sticking with this idea of Juve, something that's made me curious is Pavel Nedved's role in all of this. Obviously, legendary former player. What does this do to his reputation and his potential sort of future, if there is any future for him at an executive level?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when they all stepped down midway through the World Cup, because we had heard murmurs, Jonathan, that there was this investigation, but everything in Italy, you expect it to be drawn out and to take years. But when the entire board suddenly stepped down midway through the World Cup, I think that was a clear signal of something bad is about to happen right behind the corner. I was shocked that the 15-point deduction came this early. I thought this was something that was going to, continue through the court system and maybe be done at the end of the season. But for it to happen only a month after the whole board stepped down, sadly now, or not sadly, depending on which side of the fence you stand on, Andrea Agnelli, Pavel Nedved, these are names that are now going to be tainted for much of the footballing community and be synonymous with this whole disaster that Juventus now find themselves in.
Hey, Matteo, I got to get back to it with the players more than anything else, because I've been really impressed with what the players have done. Obviously, under Allegri, defensively outstanding until they faced Napoli and then got humiliated in many ways. And love to see the breakdown from yourself and Marco and Grella on site. I mean, that's brilliant to see that type of breakdown as to what actually went wrong. But how do you expect the players to react to this? Because a lot of players now, normally they look for an exit route. They're like, okay, no, doesn't look like we're going to have European football next season. Looks like we're going to be in an uphill battle with a lot of fans. And I saw yesterday a lot of empty seats inside the stadium, which is unusual for Juve. I mean, what is the plan now for the players? Do you think Allegri will be able to get them back on board, to buy into his ways, to try and get results and keep on these good results going forward so that maybe they end up in a European place and find some success? Or are you expecting a lot of the top players to just look for an exit?
So when this happened in 2006, if you remember, the Juventus team that went to Serie B, which is much harsher than what's happening now, they actually got relegated. A lot of the senators, as they say, the people with the biggest influence behind the scenes, the Alessandro Del Piero, Gigi Buffon, a lot of the big players, David Trezeguet, stayed at the team and played a whole season in Serie B, which is just crazy to say. So if Juventus can bounce back from that, this obviously doesn't feel as severe as dropping an entire league. the response, a lot of the players went to social media. They posted the Juventus flag. Allegri said that this is the time now that they all have to stick together. And the response from what we saw on Sunday indicates towards a locker room that looks united. But Ian and Nigel, as two former players, you know that has to be in the back of their mind is suddenly the uncertainty. Because before it looked like they were going to be a lock for a top 4 finish, maybe challenge for the Scudetto, and you're back in the Champions League, hopefully get out of the group stage next season. But now UEFA is also looking at Juventus, and there's this potential too that they're not only kicked out of European competitions, but that it goes for several seasons where they're completely banned from European competitions because they're looking now at financial fair play. Did Juventus actually have the money to meet the FFP regulations to be able to play in the Champions League? So that's a whole other element. So there's all these different cases and all these different scenarios of what happens in Serie A, what happens with UEFA, with Juventus. Imagine they win the Europa League. Do they then not go to the Champions League? We know that Champions League is a massive draw for players. It's one of the best scouting tools we can offer you, Champions League, and the money that comes with it for a team with Juventus that has losses last year of around 250 million euro. Yeah, they're desperate for the Champions League revenue that comes with being in that competition. So it cannot. There's no good news in any of this long term unless the appeals to the Sporting Court and the 15-point deduction gets reversed. They're packing the board now, Juventus, with lawyers, with people who can handle the situation better than how the whole Calciopoli scandal in the mid-2000s was handled.
And sort of keeping with the kind of off the pitch ramifications for a moment, Matteo, what does this mean sort of globally for the image of Serie A? Obviously, it's not positive, but I've been reading sort of the last couple of days about people sort of in Italy, cancelling subscriptions, not wanting to watch Serie A anymore because of the fact that, obviously Juve are such a big draw for them to now be sort of mired in this, mess. Is there a potential for it to sort of tarnish Calcio's image across Europe, certainly in the short term?
Look, the whole thing of canceling the streaming service, there's been a bit made of that in Italy where there's a lot of people that are canceling the streaming service of the rights holders over there. But I mean, I think that's a reactionary thing. And also for the Juventus fans, I understand that they're not pleased, but what did you want? Did you want nothing to happen? Because there's plenty of evidence that there was some sort of wrongdoing. They feel hard done by, but then do we just brush this aside? Would you have rather nothing happen to Juventus and that they can just continue in this practice? Because what Juventus did actually hurts a lot of the smaller Serie A teams. It benefits them and it hurts a lot of the teams that then have to sell their best players and are at a loss anyway. So, what do you want to do? Okay, you don't want to watch Juventus anymore. What can I say about that? Of course, it does affect the league. This is bad PR for the league, but the league bounced back from Calciopoli. I think the league's kind of been flat to up. We've seen, obviously, with teams like Napoli in the Champions League, there's been a lot of good buzz around the league this season, and the entirety of the league isn't just Juventus. There's also Milan, there's Inter, there's this amazing story of Napoli, which was actually kind of like the Cinderella story of what they could potentially do, winning their first Scudetto in over 30 years since the days of Diego Maradona. So there's a lot of good that's happened. There's a lot of young, fun players. This isn't the end all now of Serie A. Serie A, sadly, has bounced back from much worse than this.